A young man sitting alone in a warmly lit diner corner booth, early morning rain outside the window, laptop open, papers spread across the table, coffee cup beside him, soft golden light, cinematic, emotional, quiet. A confident young man walking into a busy diner, scanning the room, spotting an occupied booth and sitting down without asking, placing a heavy bag of blueprints on the table, ignoring the other person, completely natural, indoor lighting, realistic. Two young men sitting across from each other at a diner booth, one working on a laptop, one reviewing blueprints, neither speaking, awkward silence between strangers, warm diner lighting, shallow depth of field, cinematic. A young man ordering food at a diner by simply pointing at another customer's plate, server raising an eyebrow, the other customer looking surprised, warm, casual atmosphere, realistic, cinematic shot. Two young men sitting in the same diner booth the following week, two coffees already on the table, one pushing a cup toward the other without eye contact, quiet, comfortable silence, morning light through windows. Two young men laughing together in a diner booth, papers and blueprints between them, genuine, relaxed friendship, warm afternoon light, natural expressions, emotional connections, cinematic. A young man walking alone along a riverside path, autumn leaves, golden sky, peaceful but slightly melancholy, emotional, slow, cinematic, wide shot. Two young men walking side by side along a riverbank, late evening, warm light, long shadows, close, comfortable distance between them, deep in conversation, cinematic, wide angle. Two young men standing inside a small pavilion while heavy rain falls all around them, laughing at being caught in the rain, standing close together, warm breath visible in cold air, cinematic tension. Two young men standing very close inside a rain pavilion, laughter fading into silence, both going still, eyes meeting, something unspoken passing between them, tension, emotional closeness, no touching, cinematic. A young man turning away, answering his phone inside the pavilion, the other young man watching from behind, expression shifting, becoming composed and distant, rain still falling, cinematic, emotional. Two young men walking back through rain in silence, no longer laughing, both thinking, both quiet, emotional, distance, cinematic, slow, wide shot, riverside path. A young man sitting alone at a kitchen table at night, staring at nothing, glass of water in front of him, expression serious and resolute, internal shift happening, cinematic, dim, warm light. A young man sitting alone writing in a notebook at his kitchen table, focused, calm, determined, expression, morning light streaming in cinematic, close shot on hands writing. A young man changing his apartment door lock by himself, early morning, independent, resolute, no longer looking like someone waiting for permission, cinematic, realistic. Two young men sitting on opposite ends of a couch in an apartment, one talking quietly, the other listening, completely still, absorbing everything, no performance, just presence, warm indoor lighting. Two young men standing together over blueprints spread across a dining table, one explaining excitedly, the other watching his face instead of the blueprints, both leaning slightly close, warm lamplight, cinematic. Two young men standing very close over blueprints, one looking up and finding the other already watching him, the conversation stopping mid-sentence, tension, electric, still, no touching, just eyes meeting, emotional, cinematic. A young man arriving at an apartment door at night, unannounced, the door opening, the person inside simply stepping aside to let him in, no words needed, cinematic, dim hallway, light, warm inside. Two young men sitting across from each other in a quietly lit apartment, one talking steadily, the other listening with complete attention, no distractions, no interruptions, warm, amber light, emotional. Two young men standing in the middle of an apartment living room facing each other, one reaching out slowly, giving the other time to step back, fingers touching the other's jaw gently, cinematic, soft, warm light fade to warm blur. A young man standing alone in his apartment, leaning against the closed front door, eyes closed, breathing slowly, just stood still in the silence after someone left, warm, dim light, cinematic, emotional. A young man sitting at a table making a careful, deliberate list in a notebook, expression calm, focused, not sad, not angry, just clear and decided, morning light, cinematic, close shot. A young man standing in his apartment doorway, handing over a key, expression difficult, resigned, the other man's hand reaching to accept it, cinematic, neutral light, emotional weight. A large charity gala room full of well-dressed people, architectural projections on the walls, soft, elegant lighting, two young men arriving together arm in arm, calm and certain, cinematic wide shot. Two young men standing at a gala across the room from a third person who is watching them, expression on the watching person's face complicated and regretful, emotional tension across distance, cinematic. Two young men standing side by side at a gala wall, one explaining architectural details projected on the wall, the other listening, leaning slightly close, comfortable, familiar, warm, golden light, cinematic. A young man standing calmly in a noisy gala room speaking quietly to someone from his past, expression even and honest, not cold, not warm, just true, cinematic, close shot. Two young men lying on a rooftop at night on a blanket, city lights far below, string lights above them, looking up at a purple-gray sky, hands close together, not yet touching, warm, cinematic, wide shot. Two young men lying on a rooftop, one turning his head to look at the other turning at the same moment, eyes meeting in the dark, city noise below, warmth between them, cinematic, soft light. One young man's hand turning palm upward in the dark, the other reaching over and holding it, fingers closing gently, rooftop, city below, string lights above, no words, just stillness, cinematic, close shot on hands. A young man cooking alone in a kitchen, focused, careful, warm, golden kitchen light, late afternoon, three pots going, recipes spread on the counter, cinematic, close shots of hands working. Two young men sitting across from each other at a kitchen dinner table, wine glasses between them, windows open, warm evening breeze, city sounds outside, relaxed, deep in conversation, cinematic, warm light. A young man looking across a kitchen table at the other with a very direct, quiet expression, something real and unperformed in his face, the other going still, cinematic, close shot, warm light. One young man reaching across a kitchen table, tucking a piece of the other's hair back, gently leaving his hand against his face for just a moment, simple, certain, warm light, cinematic. Two young men sitting across from each other at a kitchen table, both still, both holding something true that has just been said between them, warm light, windows open, city outside, cinematic, emotional, close shot. A young man sitting alone in a coffee shop, smiling at his phone, warm morning light, city outside, the window, quiet, happiness, cinematic, natural light, close shot. A young man walking home through a busy city street in the evening, looking lighter than he has looked in the whole story, cinematic, golden hour, wide shot, city around him. Two young men inside a warmly lit apartment, one arriving at the door, the other already home, both settling into the space like something that has always been happening, warm light, cinematic, quiet joy. A wide rooftop garden at night, string lights, potted plants, folding table, city lights far below, two figures sitting close together, silhouettes, warm glow, cinematic, slow, final, wide shot. My sister banned me from her wedding. Our Caribbean escape ended in shock. Write a YouTube-safe LGBTQ plus romantic story but revenge chronicles story. The story must feel emotionally mature, intense, cinematic, and slow burn romantic, without violating YouTube guidelines. Direct hit core goal. Create a story so emotionally engaging and suspenseful that viewers feel compelled to watch until the very end. Magnet opening hook, very important. Start the story with a powerful, emotional hook in the first 15-20 seconds. A shocking or intimate moment. A line of dialogue that creates instant curiosity. A situation that feels unexpected, tense, and emotionally loaded. The opening must make the viewer think, what happened next? Open book story requirements. Length 18,000-20,000 words. Format paragraphs of 4-5 lines each. POV, first person or third person, your choice. Style, romantic, realistic, emotional, cinematic, slow burn. Tone, mature, warm, detailed, tension-filled. Packing. Friendship, right arrow, subtle tension, right arrow, emotional conflict, right arrow, distance, misunderstanding, right arrow, emotional climax, right arrow, resolution, revolving hearts, romantic, elements to include, safe and implied. Prolonged eye contact. Nervous tension and blushing. Heart betraying closeness. Almost kiss moments. Gentle touches, hands, shoulders, hugs. Emotional warmth, longing. Jealousy. Vulnerable conversations and honesty. Any intimate moment must fade to black, no explicit detail, brain plot elements make it deep and complex. A moment that unexpectedly changes their dynamic. Internal struggles with hidden feelings or identity. Growing romantic tension in everyday situations. Jealousy, misunderstandings, emotional distance. A strong emotional climax where truths are finally revealed. A warm, hopeful ending filled with acceptance and connection prohibited strictly do not include. Nudity. Graphic sexual content. Explicit acts. Vulgar or sexual language. Any content violating YouTube policies. Bell ending CTA mandatory. End the story with a strong emotional final hook. A subscribe, like, and comment message. A question teasing part 2. Example: should I tell you what happened next? Magnet shocking but safe thumbnail prompt. Create one highly clickworthy thumbnail prompt. Left side: shocking, emotional moment from the title story. Right side: empty/blank for text overlay, visible emotional tension or attraction. No nudity, no explicit touch. Strong eye contact, close proximity, cinematic lighting. Designed to maximize CTR for revenge story niche show more 5:21 p.m. Here is the full story, straight through, no formatting, just the story. My sister looked me in the eye across my mother's kitchen table and said, "I need you to not come to my wedding." She didn't whisper it, she didn't apologize for it. She said it the way you say something you've been rehearsing carefully, with the particular steadiness of someone who has decided that decisiveness will substitute for kindness. And then she folded her hands on the table and waited for me to respond, and I remember thinking that her nails were painted the exact coral shade she'd chosen for her bridesmaids, and that somehow that detail was the thing that made it real. My name is Adrian Reyes. I was 28 years old. I had just been uninvited from my sister's wedding. And the story of what happened next, the Caribbean, the shock, the person I met in the middle of all of it, and the thing I found when everything I thought I knew about my own life turned inside out, that story is the one I'm about to tell you. But you need to understand how we got there first. Natalie and I had always been close in the complicated way that siblings are close when one of them is the golden child, and the other one is still figuring out what they are. She was 3 years older, organized, cert, the kind of person who had a plan for everything and the discipline to execute it. She'd been engaged to Marcus for 2 years by the time the wedding came around, a big Caribbean destination wedding in St. Lucia that she had been planning with the focus of someone constructing a building. Every detail controlled, every variable accounted for. I was a variable she had not accounted for. I had come out to my family 2 years earlier, quietly and without drama, in a conversation at this same kitchen table that had gone not badly exactly but not easily either. My mother had cried and then recovered and then been, gradually, genuinely supportive in the way that some parents are when they love you more than they love their discomfort. My father had gone quiet for a month and then one evening handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Your Uncle Marco was the same way. Nobody talked about it but we all knew, and that was that." Natalie had said, "I know, I've known for years this doesn't change anything." And I had believed her. I had taken her at her word for 2 full years. I had watched her plan the wedding and helped her choose venues online and listened to her talk about table arrangements for hours and believed completely that I was her brother and she was my sister, and that was the full extent of what I was to her. Then she sat me down and told me she needed me to not come. "Marcus's family is very traditional," she said. When I said nothing, she kept going. "His grandmother is flying from Palermo, his aunts, they have certain expectations about family, about what a wedding looks like, and I can't have a distraction." "A distraction," I said. "You know what I mean. Say it, Natalie." She looked at the table. "They don't know about you, and I don't want to deal with explaining it, not that weekend, not at my wedding." I sat with that for a moment. Sat with the precise shape of what she was saying, not that she was ashamed, she would insist later, not that, just that it was complicated, just that it was the wrong time, just that she needed this one thing to go perfectly, and she couldn't have that conversation happening in the background of her perfect pictures. "Okay," I said. She looked up, surprised by the quiet. "Okay," she repeated. "I heard you," I said, and I stood up, and I left. I drove home in silence and I sat in my apartment for the rest of that evening without eating, without calling anyone, without doing anything except sitting in the particular stillness of someone who has just had something confirmed that they had been refusing to look at directly. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight to St. Lucia. Not for the wedding weekend, 3 days before it. I was going to be there first. I was going to sit on the beach of the island my sister had chosen for her perfect day alone, and I was going to figure out how I felt about being edited out of my own family's story. And then I was going to figure out what to do about it. What I did not plan for was Eli. I should tell you that I was not in a good place about relationships when I boarded that plane. My last serious relationship, a year and a half with a man named Daniel who was warm and funny and ultimately wanted things I wasn't ready to give, specifically a level of certainty about the future that I genuinely didn't have yet, had ended 8 months earlier. Not badly, just sadly in the way that endings are sad when they're nobody's fault. I had spent those 8 months working more than was healthy, seeing my friends in the careful, rationed way of someone who doesn't want to explain themselves, and slowly constructing a version of my life that was functional and quiet and asked nothing of me. I was, in other words, running. I was running in the direction of busyness, and I had gotten quite good at it. And the only reason I had slowed down at all was that my sister had looked me in the eye and confirmed my worst fear, and I didn't have the energy to run from that on top of everything else. So I got on a plane, I found my seat, I put on headphones, I closed my eyes. And then someone said, "I think that's my seat." He was not what I expected. I don't know what I expected from the person who had the window seat on a 5-hour flight to St. Lucia, someone ordinary, probably someone I'd navigate the armrest situation with and then ignore for 5 hours. Not a person who looked like Eli Navarro looked, which was, like someone who had recently made a decision that cost him something and was still carrying the weight of it, dark circles under sharp eyes, jaw set. Holding a boarding pass in one hand and a book in the other with the careful grip of someone who needs something to hold onto. He checked my row number against his boarding pass, then he checked it again. "I have 24A, he said. I looked at my own pass, I have 24A. We both looked at the seat, then we both looked at each other. His eyes were dark brown with a quality of attention in them that I noticed immediately, not aggressive, not rude, just very present, like he was actually looking, not just glancing. "Someone made a mistake," he said. "Obviously. I'll get the flight attendant. Please." He came back 5 minutes later with news that the flight was full, there had been a double booking, and the only available resolution was one of us taking a middle seat in the back row between a man with a large carry-on and a woman who had already fallen asleep on the armrest. He delivered this information with the flat tone of someone reporting whether they had nothing to do with. "I'll take the back row," I said. He looked at me for a moment, then he said, "Don't, it's a terrible seat, we can share the row, I'll take the middle." "You don't have to. I'm fine in the middle." He put his bag up, sat down in 24B, opened his book, and did not look at me again for 45 minutes. Which was somehow the most comfortable I'd felt in months. He broke the silence somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico. Not with small talk, I want to be clear about that because small talk would have been manageable. He broke it by saying, without looking up from his book, "You look like someone who's going somewhere they're not sure they should be going." I turned and looked at him. He was still looking at his book. "That's a very specific observation," I said. "I'm a very specific person." He turned a page. "You don't have to talk about it." Yeah. I wasn't going to. Good. Another 20 minutes passed, then I said, "My sister banned me from her wedding, I'm going to the island anyway." He closed his book. He turned and looked at me fully for the first time, and I saw his expression do something complicated, not pity, which I was braced for, but recognition, like I had said something that landed in a place he already knew. "Why did she ban you?" he said. "Because I paused, not from shame, just from the habit of calibrating. Because I'm gay and her husband's family is traditional and she didn't want to deal with explaining me." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "That's a terrible reason." "Yes. And you're going anyway." "I got there 3 days early, she won't even know I'm there until after the wedding's over." "What are you going to do on the island for 3 days alone?" I looked at him, I was going to figure that out. Something in his expression shifted, not quite a smile, more like a door opening slightly. "I'm also going alone," he said. "I was also supposed to be going with someone." "What happened?" He looked at the window for a moment. He decided he wasn't ready, he said quietly, "for any of it, the trip, the relationship, any of it." The air between us resettled into something new, not uncomfortable, just honest. The specific honesty that happens sometimes between strangers on planes, the temporary permission of people who will probably never see each other again. "I'm Adrian," I said. "Eli," he said. We shook hands, and then we talked for the rest of the flight. I want to try to describe what talking to Eli Navarro was like, because it was unlike talking to most people in a way that's hard to explain without sounding dramatic. Most conversations have a current running underneath them, a social negotiation, a management of impression, a gap between what's being said and what's being meant. Eli talked like he had decided somewhere along the way that the gap was too expensive. He said what he meant. He asked what he wanted to know. He listened, really listened, the full attention kind, not the waiting to respond kind. And when something you said interested him, he would go still in a particular way and then follow the thread of it further than you expected. We talked about the island he'd been before once 5 years ago with his family. We talked about families generally and what we owed them and what they owed us and the specific grief of loving people who couldn't quite love you back in the shape you needed. He talked about his ex, not bitterly, just honestly, the way you talk about something that still hurts but that you've started to understand. I talked about Natalie more than I'd intended to, more than I'd said to anyone, and he listened without once making me feel like I should soften it. "She loves you," he said when I'd finished. "I know she does. That doesn't make it okay." "No," I said, "it doesn't. But it matters," he said, "because it means this isn't over. Whatever happens this week, this isn't the end of the story with your sister. People who love you and fail you can also grow. Sometimes they do." I looked at him. "That's a generous read." "I'm not generous by default," he said. "I just think it's true in this case." He paused. "I've had to apply it to some people in my own life and I don't always like that it's true, but it usually is." The flight began its descent. I watched the island appear below us through the window, green and impossible, and surrounded by water the exact color of something you don't have a word for, somewhere between blue and green and silver depending on where the light hit. "Where are you staying?" Eli asked. I told him. His expression did the thing again, the slight door opening. "Same hotel," he said. The Emerald Bay Resort sat on a hillside overlooking a private stretch of beach, and it was the kind of beautiful that feels slightly unreal, like a place that exists specifically to remind you that the world is larger and more gorgeous than the version of it you usually inhabit. White walls and blue water and bougainvillea everywhere, deep magenta spilling over every railing and archway, the air warm and salt-heavy, and doing something immediate to my shoulders that I recognized as the specific physical sensation of tension releasing. We checked in separately. That was fine. We were strangers who had shared an accidental flight. There was no reason to extend it. He was at the bar when I came down that evening, sitting at the end near the railing that overlooked the beach, with a glass of something and the same book from the plane, and he looked up when I walked in with the kind of directness that made my chest do something inconvenient. "Dinner," he said. I sat down next to him. "Sure." Those first 2 days on the island were the kind of days I have thought about many times since, not because anything dramatic happened in them, but because of their quality. The quality of two people discovering each other in a place that has no connection to their ordinary lives, without the context that usually shapes how you present yourself, without the social scaffolding of shared friends or professional overlap or personal history. Just two people, a beach, and enough honest conversation to build something real from. We went to the same beach every morning. Not by agreement. The first morning I arrived to find him already there, and he moved his bags slightly to make room, and after that it was just a fact. We had breakfast at an open-air restaurant halfway down the beach path where they made a papaya juice I would have traveled back for on its own. We talked and read and occasionally swam, and once spent 2 hours doing absolutely nothing except sitting in the shade watching the water, which sounds like nothing and was actually quite a lot. I noticed things about him the way you notice things when your attention has nowhere else to go. He was a software engineer, which surprised me because he had the particular quality of presence I associate with people who work with their hands, something tactile and grounded about him. He'd been in a relationship for 3 years before the man who'd canceled the trip, a long, slow end to something that had once been good. He was close to his mother, complicated with his father, quietly devoted to a younger brother who was in college in Madrid. He made coffee too strong and didn't apologize for it and was entirely right not to. He read the last page of a book before starting it, which I found philosophically troubling and told him so at length, and he listened with the serious attention he gave everything, and then said, "I find suspense exhausting," with such complete sincerity that I laughed for a long time. He noticed things about me too. I could tell by the way he'd sometimes respond to something I hadn't said aloud, not in a presumptuous way, but in the way of someone who is paying close enough attention to read what's underneath. He noticed when I went quiet. He noticed when I was processing something and needed space versus when I was processing something and needed a question to draw it out. He never pushed. He just made room consistently with the particular generosity of someone who had learned how to do that and chose to do it. On the evening of the second day, we were walking back along the beach from a cove we'd hiked to, the sun going down behind the hills and the water going orange and violet, and he said, "Are you glad you came?" I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said, more than I expected to be. The island, or he paused, in general. I looked at him sideways. He was looking at the water. The light was doing something specific to his profile, and I was aware, not for the first time, of a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. In general, I said. He nodded, said nothing, but something in the set of his shoulders changed, some held thing releasing, and we walked the rest of the way back in a silence that was full of something neither of us was quite ready to name yet. The morning of the third day, the day before the wedding was set to begin, I woke up to a message from Natalie. It said, "Mom told me you went to St. Lucia, Adrian. Why are you there?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone down and went and made coffee and stood on my balcony looking at the water and tried to figure out how I felt. Angry, yes. But underneath the anger, something more complicated, a grief, a wanting, the specific ache of loving someone who has hurt you and not being able to stop loving them just because they did. I called Eli. He answered on the second ring. "Breakfast," he said. "My sister found out I'm here," I said. A pause. "Give me 10 minutes. He showed up at my door with 2 coffees from the lobby in 12 minutes, which I noted and which was, somehow, exactly what I needed. We sat on my balcony and I showed him the message and he read it and handed the phone back without commentary, waiting. "I don't know what to say to her," I said. "What do you want to say?" "I want to say that she hurt me, that what she did wasn't complicated, it was simple. She chose Marcus's grandmother's comfort over my presence at the most important day of her life, and she dressed it up in logistics so she wouldn't have to call it what it was. Then say that. She's getting married tomorrow. She's also your sister," he said, "for the rest of your life, and there are things that if you don't say them now calcify, they become the thing that's always underneath. Every holiday, every phone call, every time she introduces you and has to decide what to say." He held his coffee with both hands looking at the water. "I let things calcify with my father for 10 years, I'm still excavating." I looked at him. "What did you do?" "I finally said the thing 2 years ago. It was terrible and then it was better." He paused. "Not fixed, better, those are different things." I picked up my phone. I typed back, "I'm here because you tried to erase me and I refused to be erased. I'm not going to the wedding. I'm not going to cause a scene. I just needed to be on this island in this water in the same air because you are still my sister and I love you and I needed to grieve what you did somewhere beautiful." I sent it before I could revise it. My hands were shaking slightly. Eli looked at me. "Good," he said quietly. I laughed a little shakily. "Was it?" "It was honest," he said. "That's the same thing." She didn't respond that day. I didn't expect her to. I put my phone in my room and left it there and spent the day with Eli. We took a boat to a smaller island, a 30-minute crossing on a water taxi with 6 other tourists and a captain who played music so loudly the boat seemed to vibrate with it. And the smaller island had a beach that was nearly empty and water so clear you could see the bottom 20 feet down, and everything felt, for several hours, completely simple. We swam, we talked. We found a small restaurant on the beach that served grilled fish and something cold and lime-heavy that I had 2 of and probably shouldn't have. Eli told me about a project he'd been working on, an app he was building independently, something he cared about, and the particular anxiety of caring about something you're building because you want it to exist, not because anyone has commissioned it. I told him about my work. I was an urban designer, which he found genuinely interesting in the way he found things interesting, asking specific questions that required me to actually think. "You design spaces for people to be together," he said. "Basically. Do you think about that you're shaping how people experience community?" "Constantly," I said. "It's what I like most about it, that a plaza or a sidewalk or a park can make strangers more likely to see each other as people. That design can do that." He was looking at me with that quality of attention again, the full kind. I felt it, the way you feel warmth from a fire, something radiating, something reaching. "What?" I said. "Nothing," he said. He stopped. I like the way you think about things. The way I think about things. Yes, he looked away out at the water. It's specific. You care about the right things in the right way. He paused. I don't mean that as a compliment exactly, I mean it as an observation. It felt like a compliment. Then take it as one, he said, and the corner of his mouth did something that was almost but not quite a smile. On the boat back, the sun was going down and the water had gone gold, and everyone else on the taxi was talking or taking photos, and we were standing at the railing and the boat moved and he reached out and steadied me. One hand on my arm, automatic, and then he didn't move it away immediately and I didn't move away from it, and we stood like that while the island got closer and the light got lower, and neither of us said anything because nothing needed to be said yet. That night something shifted. We had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a proper dinner, not the beach stand ease of earlier, a real table with candles and a menu and the kind of surrounding atmosphere that makes everything feel slightly more weighted. We talked easily, the way we always did, but there was something underneath it that night that hadn't been there before or that had been there all along and had become impossible to ignore. He was talking about his brother, something funny his brother had sent him, and he was smiling, really smiling, the full version that changed his whole face, and I was watching him and I thought, I have known this person for 3 days and I feel safer with him than I have felt with anyone in years. That thought arrived with a clarity that scared me a little, not because it felt wrong, because it felt completely right and I wasn't sure I trusted completely right yet. The conversation slowed in the way it sometimes did, not from lack of anything to say but from a kind of fullness, a saturation. We were sitting at the edge of something and we both knew it and neither of us was rushing. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes. What do you do when you don't trust your own judgment? He said it carefully like he'd been holding it for a while. When you've made choices before that felt right and weren't and now something feels right and you can't tell if you're just, he paused, doing it again. I knew exactly what he was talking about. I knew because I was sitting in the same question. I think, I said slowly, that the answer is in the difference between feeling right and feeling safe. Because things can feel right when they're not, that's the exciting feeling, the one that lives at the front. But feeling safe is different. Feeling safe is quieter, it's underneath. And I think, I stopped. I think the things worth going toward are the ones where you feel both. He was very still, looking at me. And this, he said, quiet, direct. I held his gaze, both, I said. The candle between us moved in some draft. The sound of the other tables continued around us, distant and irrelevant. He reached across the table slowly, and his hand rested over mine, warm and steady, the way everything about him was, and neither of us spoke for a moment, and the moment was enough, more than enough, the specific richness of something real beginning. I want to tell you what I found on the morning of the wedding. I woke early, before the light had fully decided, and went to sit on the beach alone while it was still quiet. I needed to feel the day before it got complicated. The wedding was at a venue on the other side of the island. I was not going, had never intended to go, I just needed to survive the fact of it happening in the same air as me. I was sitting in the sand with my feet at the edge of the water when I heard footsteps, and I turned and it was Natalie. She looked exhausted. She was in a hotel robe, which meant she was staying here. Of course she was. This was the most beautiful resort on the island. Of course she'd chosen it for her wedding party. She stopped when she saw me, and we looked at each other across maybe 15 feet of sand, and something passed between us that was very old and very complicated, the whole weight of growing up together, of being the people each other's lives were built around before either of us understood what we were building. She came and sat beside me. We didn't speak for a long time. I've been going over and over what to say, she said finally. Don't, I said, don't do the speech version, just say it. She was quiet, then. I was a coward, that's it, that's the whole thing. I was scared of the conversation and I thought I could just manage around it, manage it so it didn't happen that weekend, and I told myself I'd explain it to you later, that you'd understand, that it was just logistics. She stopped. But it wasn't logistics. No. It was me choosing something easier over you. Her voice was very controlled, the way voices are when they're working hard. And I've been telling myself for weeks that I had good reasons, and this morning I woke up at 4 in the morning on the day of my wedding and thought about you being on this island alone, and I couldn't. She stopped. I couldn't live with it. I looked at the water. I'm not alone, I said. She looked at me. I met someone, I said, and even saying those words out loud so early felt true, felt like the right words for the right thing. On the plane, unexpectedly, and these 3 days have been. I didn't finish the sentence because I didn't want to give it to this conversation, but I let it exist in the air between us. She was quiet for a moment, then she said softly, tell me about him. So I did. I told her about the seat mix-up and the book and the conversations and the small island and the boat railing and the dinner and the 2 words I'd said across a candlelit table. I told her carefully and with the specific privacy of something that was still becoming itself, but I told her. And she listened, and I watched her face, and what I saw there was genuine curiosity, genuine warmth, genuine happiness underneath the guilt and the tiredness. He sounds like, she stopped herself from finishing. What? He sounds like someone who deserves you, she said. That's all I was going to say. I looked at her for a long moment. My sister, 3 years older, in a hotel robe on the morning of her wedding, sitting in the sand with the person she had tried to edit out and then, to her credit, could not. You have a lot of work to do, I said. With me and with Marcus's family, not today but eventually, if you want to be the person I know you can be. I know. This isn't fixed. I know. But I love you, I said. That's not going anywhere, you're going to have to work with that whether you want to or not. She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a cry. She leaned against my shoulder the way she used to when we were kids and she'd had a bad dream and crawled into my room at 2 in the morning. I let her. We sat there watching the light come fully up over the water, making the sea go from gray to silver to that wordless color that had no name. Get married today, I said after a while, and do it well and then we'll figure the rest out. She stood up, she smoothed her robe. She looked down at me with an expression I recognized, the one she had when she was trying not to feel too much too fast, holding it back until she could be alone with it. Thank you, she said. Go, I said. She went. I sat on the beach for a long time after. The morning filled up around me, other guests arriving, the sounds of the hotel waking, birds overhead, the water doing its patient, endless thing. I felt many things at once, the way you feel things when something has moved significantly, wrung out and lighter at the same time, the specific sensation of having said the hard thing and survived it. I heard footsteps in the sand again and turned, expecting no one in particular. It was Eli. He had 2 coffees, of course he did. He looked at me for a moment, reading whatever was on my face, and sat down beside me without asking any questions. He handed me a coffee. We sat. I talked to her, I said. I know, I saw you from the path. He paused. I didn't come down because it looked like something that needed to be the 2 of you. It did, I said. It was. And not fixed, I said. Better, I looked at him. Those are different things. He smiled, the full one. I said that. You said it first, I'm applying it. He shook his head slowly, still smiling, and we sat there in the sand with our coffees and the morning coming fully in around us, and it was the most ordinary moment, the most completely ordinary moment, 2 people sitting on a beach, and it was also the best I had felt in longer than I could specifically account for. The wedding happened on the other side of the island. I knew the exact time of it, 2 in the afternoon. Natalie had planned everything to maximize the light, and at 2 I was sitting with Eli at an open-air bar overlooking the water, and I raised my glass in the direction of wherever she was, and he raised his, and I said, to complicated people who are trying, and he said, to that, and we drank. What happens when we go home, he said. It was the first direct acknowledgement of the fact that we lived in the same city. We had discovered this on the first day, a coincidence so convenient it had made me momentarily suspicious, and of what that meant. What do you want to happen, I said. He looked at me with that direct quality that I had stopped finding startling and started finding steadying. I want to find out if this is what it feels like in an ordinary setting, he said. A Tuesday morning, a grocery store, a regular evening that isn't a Caribbean island at sunset. That's a terrifying test. I know. What if it doesn't hold up? Then it doesn't hold up, he said, but I think it will. He paused. I think you're the same person in a grocery store as you are here. I think I am too, and I think, he stopped, then more carefully, I think what matters isn't the setting, it's whether you actually see the other person, and I see you. He held my gaze. I have from the moment you said the seat was yours. It was mine. Demonstrably not. The light was better there. He laughed. It was warm and unguarded and real, and I felt it in my chest, and I thought, yes, this will hold up. I already know it will hold up. The knowing was quiet and certain, the safe kind, the kind that lives underneath. The last evening on the island, we walked to the far end of the beach where the resort lights didn't reach, and the stars were visible in a way they never were at home, close and dense and overwhelming, the sky doing its full thing with nothing in the way. We stood at the edge of the water, and the waves came in and touched our feet and pulled back out, and the night was warm and full of sound. insects, water, somewhere behind us the faint music of the hotel bar. I keep thinking about what you said, Eli said. About designing spaces for people to be together, about a plaza making strangers more likely to see each other as people. What about it? I think you do that, he said. In person, not just in your work, you make space for people to be what they actually are. He paused. You did it with me on the plane. I was in the worst version of myself that day and you just didn't push, you made room. I looked at him, you did the same thing. I know, he said, I noticed. We were standing close the way we'd gotten used to standing, the comfortable closeness of two people who have stopped policing the distance between them. The water came in again and went out. I don't do well with uncertainty usually, he said. I know you read the last page first. Exactly, his voice was quiet. But this, he turned to face me fully. In the dark, his expression was open in a way I had learned to recognize as the version of him that had decided to show up completely. I'm okay not knowing how this ends, I want to find out. I reached out and found his hand in the dark. He held on immediately, tightly, like something confirmed. Me too, I said. We stood there at the edge of the water while the waves came in and went out and the stars continued overhead and the island held us in its warm, enormous, indifferent beauty, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was the kind of moment that goes somewhere inside you and stays, the kind that you return to later when you need to remember that things can be good, that they can surprise you with their goodness when you stop protecting yourself from being surprised. We flew home 2 days later, side by side, not by accident this time. He had the window. I had the aisle. We negotiated the armrest immediately and both claimed it and neither of us gave it up, and it became the first of many small negotiations that were also always a form of choosing each other. My phone had messages I hadn't read yet, Natalie, 3 of them sent from what I guessed was the night of the wedding. I read them on the plane quietly while Eli read his book. The first said, I told Marcus about you tonight, at the reception. I told him that my brother exists and that he matters and that his family is going to have to learn that. The second said he was upset. I expected that. We are going to have a hard conversation tomorrow. I think we probably needed to have it a long time ago. The third said, I love you, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep being sorry until I've earned something better. I read them twice. Then I put my phone down and looked out the window at the clouds below us, white and shifting, the world invisible underneath them. Eli glanced over, he didn't ask, he just waited. She told him, I said, about me at the reception. He went still. That took courage, he said carefully. It did, I agreed. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. No, he said, it's the beginning of something. The beginning of something? I thought about that phrase, what it meant, how many beginnings were happening at once in this moment. Natalie and Marcus and the conversation they were going to have. Me and Natalie and the long, non-linear work of rebuilding trust. Me and Eli and the ordinary Tuesdays we were about to find out the truth of. Eli, I said. Meh. There's a farmer's market near my apartment on Saturday mornings. It's not a Caribbean beach, but the coffee is genuinely good. He looked at me. Is that an invitation? He said. It's a Tuesday morning, I said, grocery store. Ordinary setting. His expression did the thing, the door opening. Yes, he said simply. I smiled. I looked back at the window. The clouds had broken somewhere ahead of us, and through the gap the city was visible far below, small and dense and complicated, full of plazas and sidewalks and parks, full of the spaces I spent my days designing so that strangers might see each other as people. Full of beginnings. The farmer's market was on a Saturday. It was cold. There was a line for the coffee stand and the coffee was, as promised, genuinely good. Eli held his cup with both hands the way he always did, wearing a coat that was slightly too light for the weather because he'd been stubborn about the forecast, and he was looking at a table of bread with the focused seriousness he brought to all decisions, and I stood beside him in the ordinary November morning and felt the warmth in my chest that I had felt on the island, except quieter now and more certain and more mine. This one, he said, picking up a sourdough. You haven't smelled it yet. He looked at me. Does that matter? Enormously. He smelled it, considered, returned it and picked up a different one. This one, he said again. Better, I confirmed. We walked through the market and bought bread and vegetables we had no specific plan for and a jar of something labeled simply hot honey that Eli examined for a long time before putting it in the bag with the decision of a person who has committed. It was ordinary. It was completely, genuinely, perfectly ordinary. And it held up exactly as well as I'd known it would. 6 months later, Natalie called me on a Sunday morning. She and Marcus were in couples therapy, her choice, she said, and hard and necessary. She had told his mother directly at Christmas with Marcus present, and the conversation had been difficult and the grandmother had cried and nobody had resolved anything overnight. But she had said it. She had stood in her kitchen and said, "My brother is gay and he matters to this family," and Marcus had stood beside her. "It's slow," she said. "Most things are," I said. "Eli's good for you," she said. "I can tell from every story you tell." "Yes," I said. "Tell me one more, just one." So I told her about the farmer's market, about the bread, about the hot honey which had turned out to be extraordinary on everything and had become a permanent fixture in my kitchen and subsequently in Eli's kitchen when he moved more and more of himself into my space and then, eventually, officially, not gradually at all. She laughed. It was the real laugh, the one I grew up with, the one that means she has let something in. "Good," she said. "That's really good, Adrian." "Yeah," I said, "it is. I want to leave you with the image I come back to most. Not the island, though the island was everything. Not the candlelit dinner or the hand in the dark or the stars over the water, though all of those matter. I come back to the plane, the very beginning of it. A double-booked seat and a man who could have taken the bad seat in the back row and offered to instead, for no reason except that it was the decent thing, and a 5-hour conversation that started because two people told each other the truth on a Tuesday when truth was what was needed. That's the thing about loss and grief and being edited out of people's stories. It can make you want to disappear, to take the bad seat quietly, to stop asking for what you need. And the most important thing I did that year was not book the flight, not go to the island, not sit on that beach and say the hard thing to my sister. The most important thing I did was not give up my seat. If this story found you when you needed it, if you recognized something in Adrian's quiet refusal to disappear, or in Eli's steady, patient way of showing up, or in the long, complicated work of loving someone who has let you down and choosing not to let that be the end, then you already know why these stories matter. Leave a comment below and tell me which moment hit you hardest. The plane conversation, the beach at dawn, the farmer's market. I read every single one and I promise you I do. Like this story if it gave you something, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And here's what I want to leave you wondering, because there is a part 2 and it's coming and it's going to change everything you thought you understood about what happened in St. Lucia. There was someone else at that resort, someone who knew Eli, someone who had followed him there, who had seen the canceled trip as an opportunity and the island as a second chance. And what happened when that person appeared on the last night, what Eli said, what I saw, what it almost cost us before it made us stronger, that story is waiting. Should I tell you what happened next?